Maybe you've once looked up at the night sky in a moment of solitude and asked, why was I born into a family like this? You don't feel like you belong. You feel too sensitive, too different, too awake among a group that's still asleep. And you begin to wonder whether something is wrong with you, or if the world around you has become too distorted to hold something that pure. Carl Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." And perhaps what frightens you most isn't your family or the painful past, but the admission that, from the very beginning, you've always been different. And that same difference is a calling. In this video, I'm not just telling you why strong souls are often sent into the most chaotic families. I won't sugarcoat this story with hollow philosophies or comforting promises, because awakening is not light that descends. It's light that rises from within you, after you've walked through layers of darkness, brokenness, and the kind of silence that wounds. We'll explore what happens in toxic family dynamics through the lens of Jung. What makes old souls, those who carry a soul mission, often placed in the role of the outcast, the healer, the one left behind? And more importantly, I'll tell you this: you are not crazy. You are not wrong. You are on the right path. If you've ever felt like a stranger in your own home, then this video is not just content. This is the echo of your soul. This is the chapter you're ready to enter. Not because you've become strong enough, but because you've become real enough. Take a deep breath, and don't just watch with your eyes. Watch with the parts of you that once shattered and are now slowly coming back together. None of us chooses where we are born, but there are souls who, it seems, even before entering this world, carried with them a promise that they would learn, endure, and awaken. These strong souls are rarely born into families full of love and safety. On the contrary, they arrive amid chaos, in homes where words are weapons and silence is punishment. They grow up in spaces where love is conditional, where their very existence is seen as a burden rather than a miracle. Why is that? Why are those with deep sensitivity, sharp intuition, and refined inner worlds born into wounds? Carl Jung believed that nothing in life is random. The repeating patterns, the pain we carry, and even the families we are born into, all of it is part of the soul's evolutionary map. Family is not just the first environment we encounter. It is also a mirror that reflects the deepest, unconscious layers within us. Jung called this the family complex. The conflicts, traumas, and repetitive patterns within a family system that can shape a person's entire psychological life until they become conscious enough to break it. A strong soul is not strong because it's never been hurt. On the contrary, they are strong because they have faced the unbearable and kept walking. But that process is not blind endurance. It is the journey of individuation, the process of becoming one's true self, breaking free from the shadows of familial expectations, cultural conditioning, and inherited false beliefs that have been passed down from generation to generation. In this first part, we will examine how wounds are formed within families through Jung's lens. Why do children from toxic families tend to develop heightened psychological sensitivity? How can wounds from parents become a catalyst for self-discovery and spiritual awakening? And what makes some people collapse under the weight of their pain, while others rise, even if they once felt like nothing but ashes? As a child, you didn't know how to distinguish between yourself and your environment. With such a tender soul, your parents were God. If they loved you, you believed you were lovable. If they criticized you, you thought something was wrong with you. If they were silent, neglectful, ununderstanding, or controlling, you learned to be quiet, neglect yourself, not understand, and control yourself. You didn't rebel against them. You rebelled against yourself. Carl Jung called this the moment when the shadow is first formed. Every child is born whole. But in toxic families, the most authentic parts of the child, sensitivity, intense emotions, the ability to feel others, passion, are seen as too much. Why are you so sensitive? Be quiet, you're overreacting. Nobody cares. Stop making it a big deal. Slowly, what was once light in the child becomes rejected. They push their most beautiful parts into the dark to emotionally survive. Jung once said, "We are born whole and wounded by those who have forgotten how to be." Parents aren't toxic because they want to be. They're harmful because they've never been healed. However, when a sensitive child grows up in such an environment, they learn to suppress their intuition to please others. They become good to avoid punishment, well-behaved to avoid abandonment. But in that process, their soul begins to fracture. There's a strange paradox here. The strongest children are not the defiant or rebellious ones, but the ones who are deeply sensitive. They don't just feel their pain, they think their mother's suppressed anger, their father's disappointment, and the exhaustion of the whole family. They absorb the entire emotional ecosystem around them like a sponge. And then they think, if I try hard enough, maybe everyone will be happy. This isn't a conscious thought, it's a spiritual response. A soul strong enough to sacrifice itself to maintain a connection. But the price of that connection is the loss of the self. And nothing is more painful than growing up in a family where you were never allowed to be yourself. You may have been raised, but not nurtured. Protected, but not understood. You survived, but you didn't truly live. And so, you enter the world with an adult body, but a shadow that has never been named. You become skilled at enduring, adept at listening, and trained at pleasing. But at night, in the silence of your room, you can't hear yourself. Because the child inside you, the one who was abandoned in a house full of people, is still waiting for someone to come back for them. Still waiting for you. When the past doesn't stay behind, signs of unhealed wounds. There's a bitter paradox in psychology. The more we try to run from the past, the more it controls us. A person wounded by their family doesn't enter the world as a blank slate, but as an exposed roll of film, carrying the images of their parents, the silence of childhood, the emotions left behind, and the beliefs that never belonged to them. Carl Jung referred to this as a complex, a psychological pattern formed by profound emotional experiences, often repetitive and unconscious. Have you ever wondered why you keep falling into the same types of relationships? Why do you keep choosing the wrong person even though you swore, this time will be different? That's not fate. That's the unconscious. Someone who has been parented is often drawn to people who make them feel familiar, not safe, but familiar. Someone who was ignored may feel excited by the challenge of earning someone's attention. Someone who was constantly judged will continue to choose people who never truly recognize them, as if trying to win the approval they never received from their parents. They don't love that person. They love the feeling of trying to rewrite the past through them. This is the trap Jung referred to as the takeover of the unconscious. When we are unaware of our wounds, we often reenact them in our present lives, through our work, relationships, and even the way we treat ourselves. Someone who was harshly judged as a child may become their own most severe critic. A child who was once told, "You're too sensitive," may grow up learning to suppress their feelings, believing that's the way to become mature. Someone who was never loved for who they were may become an expert at playing roles in society. Perfect, successful, agreeable, but hollow inside. And worse, they believe the problem is them. They think they're too weak, not good enough, something's wrong. But Jung would say, no, there's nothing wrong with you. You're just living with a psyche that was never updated after trauma. You're running your present life on an outdated emotional operating system. And that's why you feel drained, exhausted, and constantly self-doubting, because you don't understand why you're doing everything right and still don't feel happy. This is where the journey home begins. Not a return to your family, but a return to yourself, to the child who was once pushed aside, to the pain that was once suppressed, to the dreams that were once buried. When you realize that all the wrong choices, all the painful cycles, weren't because you were broken, but because you were never truly seen or healed, you begin to release self-blame. And that's when the first light of freedom appears. But Jung also warned, this freedom doesn't come from running away from pain. It comes from moving through it. No one truly matures without confronting the shadow. And the shadow, The part you reject, deny, hide, almost always begins in the family. You cannot begin the healing process if you still believe that someone else needs to change for you to feel whole. This is the most brutal truth of inner awakening. Salvation does not come from anyone but yourself. It begins when you pause and ask, what part of me agreed to stay in pain for this long? Not to assign blame, but to see clearly. What have I traded to hold on to this relationship? What was the price I paid to be loved? My freedom? My authenticity? My soul?
Carl Jung referred to this as the beginning of individuation, the process of returning to one's true self. It is not about becoming someone new, as motivational slogans often claim. It's about removing layer after layer of false identity, masks built from fear, from the hunger for acceptance, from the terror of abandonment. Individuation does not begin in light, it starts in darkness, in the quiet acceptance of a truth you once lost yourself. And then you begin to return, not in haste, not with judgment, but with kindness toward your most fragile parts. There is no clear map for this journey. On some days, you'll feel strong, lucid, and at peace. And the next, a song, a careless word, or just someone's silence may reduce you to tears. It doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're becoming honest. You're no longer hiding behind the armor of busyness, behind the role of being okay. You're living truthfully, and truth hurts. But it's in the deepest ache that the light first begins to enter. Jung believed our soul always knows the way back. It's only waiting for us to become quiet enough to hear it. Awakening doesn't arrive like a storm. It comes as a whisper. You don't have to live the way others programmed you. You can redefine your worth. You can rewrite your story. You don't have to be perfect to be worthy of love. You only have to be honest with yourself. Individuation is also the moment you realize forgiveness is not about forgetting what happened. It's about releasing the wish that the past could be different. You no longer wait for your parents to apologize, or for an ex to admit their wrongs, or for society to hand you a medal for surviving. You don't need it anymore, because you found validation from within, and that is true freedom. A strong person is not someone who has never broken. It's someone who shattered, who lost direction, who gave their trust and watched it fall, and still chose to return to their own heart, still decided to love themselves again, even after abandoning that love before. They still chose to rebuild their inner life, brick by brick, from the ruins of the past.
The shadow, the confrontation, and the return to your soul. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." And nothing represents the unconscious more powerfully than the shadow, the rejected, repressed, denied parts, yet always alive within us. Let's be honest. Haven't there been moments when you got angry at someone close to you, not just because they were wrong, but because they touched a wound buried deep inside you? Sometimes you feel suffocated by your parents' control, not only because they interfere, but because you still haven't dared to take control of your own life. Or you're obsessed with being validated because the abandoned child within you is still longing for a gaze of love it never received. The shadow is not something evil. It is merely the part of you that had to be left behind to survive your past environment. In toxic families, children learn to survive by cutting off their most authentic parts: sensitivity, creativity, righteous anger, even self-worth. To be loved, you learn to need nothing. To be left alone, you learn to stay silent. But the cost of survival was the loss of your true self. Jung called the confrontation with the shadow a kind of descent into the underworld, a psychological underworld journey. Not to be punished, but to rescue the forgotten soul. When you dare to look into the darkness, you begin to see the messages hidden beneath the anger, the anxiety, the breakdown. You'll see, I'm not bad, I'm just in pain. I'm not unlikable, I just was never taught how to love without hurting. What I fear is not the world, it's the unhealed memories still living inside me. Darkness doesn't vanish by being ignored. It dissolves only when you bring the light of awareness, compassion, and honesty to meet it. And the strange thing is, the shadow that once caused you the most suffering, once integrated, becomes your deepest source of strength. A person once labeled as weak in childhood after embracing their sensitivity, can become a healer for the entire community. A person once branded as a rebel can become the pattern breaker who leads a new generation forward. The shadow, when engaged with instead of suppressed, becomes an ally of the light. You will never heal by becoming a prettier version of yourself. You only heal when you embrace your messy, angry, fragile, and broken parts, like a mother holding her wounded child. That is when you become the parent to your inner world, the one your toxic family could never be for you. In the end, Jung did not teach us to run from the past, but to transform it into the raw material of spiritual awakening. You were not born into that family to be destroyed, but to remember. A strong soul has never been wounded, but one who dares to rise from that wound and lead others still trapped in the dark. Carl Jung was not just a psychoanalyst. He was someone who saw the soul in the cracks of society. And one of the most profound ideas he left behind is this: the individual and the collective are not separate. Each person is a cell carrying the memory, the wounds, and the healing of the entire human race. Imagine this. You were born into a toxic family, not because you were unlucky, but because you were the first in that bloodline to be conscious enough to end the cycle. You are the cycle breaker, the one who breaks the chain, the one your ancestors have been waiting for, the one strong enough to say, "This pain ends with me. I will not pass it on to the next generation." And that is the most sacred work a soul can do. You may have once thought you were the black sheep in the family, but sometimes the black sheep is the only one brave enough to step away from the herd, the first to ask questions, the one who dares to walk away, the one who dares to live authentically, and the one who will lead the way back through love. Jung called this process individuation, the becoming of a trustworthy individual. But he also said, individuation is never just for yourself. When you become whole, you help the collective become more complete. When you heal, you raise the vibration of the entire world around you. And no, you don't have to become a therapist or a leader to do this. Sometimes, it's simply not yelling at your child the way your parents did. It's listening to yourself instead of betraying yourself to please others. It's pausing, breathing, and choosing honesty over pretending. Just that, and you have already changed the future. In toxic communities, sensitive people are often seen as weak. However, Jung pointed out that sensitive souls are the first to feel the distortion in the collective energy field. They feel pain before that pain has words. They cry on behalf of those who've forgotten how to cry. And they are the ones called to be transformers, not because they're better, but because they feel more. And when appropriately channeled, that is a sacred gift. When you look back at your journey, with a wounded childhood, with panic attacks, with sleepless nights, don't just see the pain. See the growth you've achieved. See the light you've lit in the darkness. And remember, those who hurt you were once children who weren't loved the right way. They hurt you because they were never taught how to heal themselves. But you are different. You are learning. You are listening. You are rewriting the story. If you've stayed with me until the end of this journey, I want you to know this. You didn't just watch a video. You just went through a rite of rebirth. Carl Jung believed that we don't become whole by shining, but by embracing the darkness. And if you've ever carried pain, anger, or the feeling of being abandoned by those who were supposed to love you the most, then you are the one bringing light to future generations. You are the one ending a cycle, the one beginning a new current, the one rewriting the entire book of love, safety, and freedom, starting from within. Not everyone born in pain becomes cruel. Some choose to become gentle, to love themselves first, so they don't repeat the mistakes of the generations before. And if you are on that path, then I want to tell you, I'm proud of you. Keep going. Even if this path feels lonely, is the most worthy road to walk. And don't forget, when you heal, you're not just doing it for yourself. You're doing it for an entire lineage, for the children yet to be born, and for those who still cannot face the darkness within themselves. If this video resonated with you, please leave a comment and share your thoughts and experiences. Or write, "I am the one who ends the cycle." That is a declaration, a mark, a commitment you send to the universe. And if you feel this journey deserves to continue, hit like, subscribe to the channel Light Through Shadows, and join me in exploring more of the soul's shadowed, radiant depths. I wish you peace, not the fake kind that comes from silence, but the peace that comes from embracing everything. I wish you strength, not from a mask, but from your raw, uncovered heart. I want to give you freedom, not from the world, but from your fear. See you in the following video.